Um, I'd like to welcome you all today to the next in our webinar series linked to school and college improvement and staff development. This event is kindly brought to you today by Dementia Education, the home of school IP and college IP. I'm personally excited today to introduce you to today's speaker, Liz Worthen from Creating Value in Schools. Liz is an expert in school improvement with over 25 years of experience working in education. And she's going to be incredibly valuable insight today on keeping great staff at the same time not bursting the budget. So today's session, you'll get some simple low-cost ways to keep your best teachers, clear examples that you can actually take away from this, and some practical advice using Liz's experience. This session is all about these real strategies that are going to make a difference to your organisation. So without further ado, I'd like to give a big warm welcome to Liz Worthen. So over to you then, Liz.
Oh, thank you very much, Andy, and great to be with you today. And yes, I think this is retention. There are some big, scary things going on, but there are actionable, practical things that we can do, smaller things to bigger things. And yes, not everything has to cost. So I wanted to talk a bit about what gets me curious about this. I started off my career as a teacher. I taught for a comprehensive in London for 5 years, and then moved into working in program development and professional development and content. I was head of content at Optimus Education for 10 years, where a lot of what we were about was trying to find ways to make life easier for people, saving time. I know school life is so intense. And sometimes that's just the biggest challenge, isn't it? And so I'm just very curious about how we can try and ease that stress, make life easier, and help people work more sustainably. And that's very much what I'm about, creating value in schools. How can we work more sustainably in all senses of the word? So let's have a think about, where we are with retention at the moment. And some of this is, more applicable to state schools in England, but I think within the independent sector and the international sector, some of these challenges are still here about needing to keep teachers in the classroom. We've passed that threshold of 40,000 teachers exiting state schools in England in the last couple of years. We know, yes, women aged 30 to 39 are some of that biggest group. We've got a stressed workforce. The Teacher Wellbeing Index, which is put out every year by Education Support, has just come out in the last week or so. And again, we see like 76% of staff reporting feeling stressed, and 29% considering leaving due to pressures on mental health and well-being. And I think in the DfE latest workforce survey, that percentage of people thinking about leaving was more like 34%. And pay rises sound nice, but that's not an option, is it, for many schools? And in any case, it's perhaps not necessarily the pay that is the issue. And just to, I think, these this infographic from the Education Policy Institute, there's a link in the slide, very happy to share the slides so people can follow the links later. Just shows it's data from a couple of years ago, but it really paints that picture of how just the number of teachers staying in role is dropping off, whereby, for example, 5 years ago, about 70, back in 2010, approximately 75% of teachers would still be in the profession 5 years after entering it. Now that's down to about 68%. So we know we've got a challenge, but there are things we can do about it. And there are research and surveys, so we can draw on evidence-based practice. And broadly, there are practical things we can do, actions that will build up and make a difference. A lot of this is interconnected. And yes, we are all subject to some external forces that we can't control. But I think it's quite good to think about, what are the things that we can control? What can we have influence over? And focus on those. So we're going to talk about workload, well-being, flexible working, relationships with pupils and parents, and then looking at opportunities for professional growth. Okay, so let's dive in with, the knotty challenge of workload. When you look at that survey, like the DFE Working Lives of Teachers and Leaders, that survey where 34% of people said they were considering, of teachers and leaders said they were considering leaving, I think it was 90% said workload was one of the chief reasons. And the other top reason, not surprisingly, was stress and well-being. And of course, those two things are quite interconnected. And one of the things I find interesting too is this idea that potentially, is that quote from the NFER report shows, sometimes it's maybe not always a workload itself, but it's having control over it. For example, as an English teacher, if mock exams are coming up, I know that I'm going to need to put time aside for marking those mock GCSE exams. That's fine. I can plan that in. I know when the dates are. But it's when things, oh, Liz, actually, we just need to do this. Oh, and actually, we're going to do this extra exam practice run. It's sometimes the things that drop in unexpectedly that will cause the bigger stress. The Education Endowment Foundation have just released a great summary of evidence as well around evidence around recruiting, retaining and supporting teachers. And some of the top priorities they found for reducing workload, again, not surprisingly, we'll come on to this: behaviour management, pastoral care, feedback and marking, lesson planning, pupil welfare. But I think, for example, like the lesson planning one is interesting because they made the point that, yes, lesson planning is a driver of workload, but people also care about it. It's also about people's professional autonomy and their agency. Lots of teachers like planning lessons. That's where they get to, express their love for their subject, their craft. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, okay, we'll make it so you don't have to do any lesson planning then. That wouldn't necessarily work. Okay, so what are some of the things that maybe we can do? I think a very practical thing is for senior leaders, team leaders, looking at deadlines, making sure that they are all known in advance, shared, so that people can plan in and know when those key pinch points are going to be throughout the year. And yes, beware that, oh, can you just, when people are stressed and tired and harassed, being that, can you just request, could just send people over the edge. If something feels like it's time consuming, then maybe it is. I think it's great to, question processes. Is there a quicker way we could do this? Are we actually using this? Is this task we're asking people to do, is it actually contributing to our core purpose of quality first teaching or improving teaching and learning? Is it actually helping us do that? Is it help? And yes, technology. And there's been a lot of talk about AI, and I think it's fine to have some mixed feelings about AI. But it is a tool that teachers are using, and we're seeing from the EEF, again, the Education Endowment Foundation, are running studies into the use of AI tools. And so for their finding, for example, in this study, I think it was science teachers planning year 7 and 8 lessons, and they were saving on average 25 minutes a week through using AI to help do things like generate quizzes or activities or find sources for them. So I think actually, so I also think providing AI training for staff is really important because yes, there are caveats with AI and we need to know how to use it safely and effectively. But the DFE, the Department for Education, have put out some free training that's there available. Actually, something else I noticed from the Education Endowment Foundation policy research summary they made the point that sometimes when schools introduce kind of workload saving initiatives, they don't immediately have an impact. In fact, sometimes the immediate effect is people say, oh, actually, this is creating more work for us, not less. Sometimes things need time to bed in. Okay, so that's definitely something to bear in mind. See, Andy, I don't know if you wanted to come in with any questions or thoughts as yet.
Yeah, because obviously what you're saying aligns with what we do in dementia education. I think the big balance is about workload. And one thing that I know has been come up in conversations in some of your, the people attending here might have found that there is actually a known saying that the better you seem to be at the job you are, the more you're given to do. So sometimes, and I don't know whether you've got anything that you want to say about that, Liz, because I think sometimes leaders in school, they reward the best
Mm.
colleagues by giving them more work to do. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, maybe sometimes do your work quietly, so you don't get that attention. Or perhaps what you could also to offer to do instead is say, can I share some of what I'm doing? Let me show other people how I'm creating these resources. Let me give other people these skills, perhaps. But yes, sometimes that is the way, I think.
And I think the other thing, what you said, is it is about planning. I think when I was a head teacher, it was trying to plan out, and you can't get everything 100% right, but trying to plan out the whole of the year, in
Yeah.
sometimes like a glorified Gantt chart where you knew where the pinch points were. So you didn't, and when you were going to introduce anything, so obviously, schools have been doing things like self-evaluation, school improvement, those type of things, same as colleges. Point is, if you're going to introduce something, everything does not need to be introduced in September.
Oh, yeah.
Certain things can be introduced at certain times because change does become stressful, and change does require, as what you rightly pointed out, was as you introduce something, it takes a while to embed, and
Yeah.
change will increase workload, but it's like seeing the bigger picture at the end. And I think
Mm.
sometimes you can't just keep on, everyone has the goodwill at heart about reducing workload, but sometimes by adding extra content in the short term, it does increase the amount of
Yeah.
work. It's making sure the same person isn't having to do all the introduction, and the impact isn't going to be on all the staff at the same time. So it is very careful about planning things throughout the school year, but that's obviously a leadership issue. And that's just, I say,
Mm.
that's just my point of view on that.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely, yes, planning and I think and it's an interesting one because I feel in a lot of the the DFE surveys, while we've seen a bit of a reduction in teachers' reported workload in the last year or two, it's not significant. This seems to be quite a difficult one to crack. But yeah, I think finding those small changes, planning things in, good way to go. And I'm very happy if anyone has other suggestions to share in the chat, please go for it, or some of the things that you've been trying out, maybe things that have worked or things that haven't worked. Okay, moving on to strategy number 2. Yeah, is about addressing well-being. And of course, this does tie in with work, with the workload too. But yes, the latest teacher well-being index showing a 76% of staff are stressed and even more for the senior leaders. One of the things I find really interesting is that reports, approximately half of people surveyed said that their organization's culture negatively affects their mental health. But it's the senior leaders who are most at risk of the burnout and the stress, the insomnia. And to me, I would assume it's the leaders who set the tone. So I think yeah. So I think there's something going on there, isn't it, where there's a culture of work or stress, or maybe there's a culture where people think I've got to be working really hard all the time. And yeah, some of the ways that's manifesting, sleep is one of the top ones. But yeah, and I think and also coming through, I think in that teacher wellbeing index for this year was just the amount of people who actually exhibit symptoms which could be clinical depression. We've got a bit, so we need to do something about this. And yes, it's hard, isn't it? Because I think there are a lot of things that are outside of our control. I mean, for example, a lot of for state schools in England, a lot are really finding that, the lack of funding for other services around, say, social care or mental health, mean that a lot of problems are ending up on the school's doorstep. Ofsted, it's not necessarily something within our sphere of control, but I think it is good to think about what um, skills or models or frameworks will help staff manage this stress or bring less of that stress, or feel less of that stress. So yeah, and I think it's important to think about this strategically as a whole school approach. You know, that cliched fruit bowl or the yoga sessions probably aren't going to fix it unless that is genuinely what your staff want. And that's why I think that actually asking staff what are their biggest stresses, what's going on for you, what do you think would help with your managing workload, what would help you with managing your well-being is really important. And if you are going to ask, then of course it is then important to talk about what people have said and what you're going to do about it, and be honest about the things that you can or can't do something about it. You know, if everyone says, well, actually the thing we'd like to have is 30% PPA, you know, preparation free time, please. That just may well not be something that you can deliver. But what can you do? I think resilience is an interesting one too, because some of the things I'm hearing from some practitioners and consultants is that maybe for teachers too, or for young people and teachers, we all need to practice resilience. And there are things like the PERMA positive psychology model framework. If I remember, P stands for positive emotion, E for engagement, R for relationships, M for meaning, A for accomplishment. And it's a way of thinking through, like, what matters to me? What are the things that that make me feel better, give me a sense of meaning, give me a sense of purpose? There's a link there. You can see some more about that. Rest. Let's encourage, I think encouraging sleep, encouraging rest. There are lots of different types of rest. It was in a recent podcast I did with Nicola Harvey, who is a mental health, works in mental health and well-being, and she talked about a book by a lady whose name escapes me at this moment, but she was talking about different types of rest. I know people have different feelings about evening and weekend work, and some people say, well, actually, for me, I want to be able to work at the times that are convenient to me, and sometimes that is in the evening or the weekend. That's fine. But I do think, yeah, encourage people to use things like email scheduling tools. So even if you are writing your emails on a Saturday morning, people aren't going to get them till Monday. And if you are in a position where you think maybe we can invest some money in some wellbeing strategies, things you might consider around, say, mental health first aid. Again, talking with I spoke to a head teacher not that long ago who said they'd done it, and actually they found, although they did it, they trained some teachers in mental health first aid with a mind that this would be useful for the students. They actually found it was quite good. It was good for colleagues too. They had more of an understanding of when to see that maybe people are in crisis or people need help. Teacher Tap and the EEF have done some research recently around recruitment and the things that make a difference to people. And I think they found things like health perks, health benefits were actually quite popular with staff. Okay, we're going to move on now to number 3, thinking about flexible working opportunities. Again, for thinking about, I think, state school staff in England, something around like just under 50% of staff currently have a flexible working arrangement. And I've put some examples of that on the next slide, but by flexible working, that could be working part-time, it could be a job share, it could be doing compressed hours, term time only hours. It could be a phased retirement. It can be things like time off in lieu, or just, days time, for example, days that parents get out to go and see things that their kids are doing, or some people have tried doing duvet days with staff. But I think we are in an interesting climate, aren't we? And again, this is perhaps partly thinking more about how we draw people into the profession and not just keeping them there. But yeah, we've got a situation now where many people are working remotely. And so people might look at the teaching profession and say, I've got that idea of having to be there all the time might not seem very attractive. And to an extent, you need to be in front of the children to be teaching them. But where are there opportunities for people to work more flexibly? And, even something like being able to take that preparation time off site, for some people, can make a real difference. Another really interesting thing, I feel like, so on the one hand, while we're hearing people say, yes, flexible working is beneficial, we want it, we feel it's helping retention. On the other hand, 65% of staff, teachers and leaders asked, said they wouldn't feel confident requesting flexible working, and they believed it would harm their career prospects. So there's definitely work to do around culture and attitudes to flexible working. Can you be a senior leader and work part-time? And yes, we do have examples. It is perfectly possible to be a head teacher and work 4 days a week, but that needs to be part of the culture. So here are just some of the ways that flexible working might look in practice. And I think here are some of the things to consider or questions you might want to ask with other members of staff. For example, is flexible working something which is routinely offered to everyone, or is it about individuals requesting it? Because I think if it's a proactive offer, here's something that's out to everybody. Here are some of the ways you can if you want to work flexibly, or we can consider these requests. I think that might make that's less scary than being that individual person who's asking for something which they don't think might hurt their future prospects. A culture that's positive about flexible working. Do you have any models of that from the top? Even if can you give teachers a time to take time off site when they can, do their work when they feel they're most productive? Do you have a flexible working policy in place? And on the document, I've got a PDF document that's linked at the end of the slides, and that includes a link to an example flexible working policy. Now, actually, just going back, I think on this slide, I included a couple of case studies. These are not things that everyone can do, but there is a multi-academy trust in England, Dixon's, who have trialed a 9-day fortnight. And they've written about it. Again, they're doing a research study on it on their YouTube channel. They've talked about the process of it, and interesting. And generally it has been a positive thing for staff, though a few say perhaps for the newer teachers, not so good. They also, I don't think they've done it for all staff. It's only for teaching staff currently. So potentially it's setting up a bit of a divide with the operational staff, support staff. And the other case study, just actually both the case studies also, what they also highlight, is the potential for saving money. So yes, whilst having part-time job sharing staff could feel more expensive, your bursar, your finance leader might be saying, oh yeah, this is very, if we offer flexible working to everybody, this could be very costly. But there are also savings to be made. Recruitment costs. I think in that DFE case study, the lady makes the point that they've saved thousands in recruitment costs because teachers are happier to stay. You might also save on staff absence. If people are feeling better, feeling healthier, they might be off less often.
To interrupt you there, Liz, because I was just having a quick think about that, because obviously when I was a head teacher, and I suppose it was about whether people called it job share, flexible working, and conversations that I used to have were, how can I restructure the week? Because when I was a head, we normally end like, for example, CPD on a particular day. But obviously, you'd want those people then to be there, but it might not be their particular day. And the same was whether you call them inset days, training days, or those type of things. They normally occurred on a Monday rather than a Friday. And again, it impacted on there. Do you pay those extra people? And the other thing that possibly some people didn't think about, and this is conversations I used to have with people who wanted to be more flexible, who wanted to have reduced hours, was trying to make sure they were self-disciplined, because as you're aware, the teaching profession has a tendency to fill its time with things. So you end up, for example, a teacher, and then they plan, obviously, after school, post time. And what you found was if you weren't careful, those members of staff might end up working 3 days, a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but on the Thursday or Friday, they carry on working, planning. So they'd actually still be working 5 days.
Mm,
So it was about being self-disciplined. So I don't know what your thoughts
definitely.
are, or whether anyone else wants to join in the chat on that, because I
Mm,
think it has to be, it's not just a matter of reducing hours, reducing days. It's also about educating people and restructuring what the school week's going to have to be.
mm. Yes, definitely. I know you hear with those logistical challenges around or parents' evenings and things like that. But I think it's really because I think in any business, in my previous role, actually, I worked part-time 4 days a week, and I was pretty strict. I had other things I did on my day off, so I wasn't particularly tempted to work on those days off. But I know that is the case quite often for people. I think sometimes what you just really need to stress to people is you are not being paid to work that day, and it's not only just the pay. You're not getting pension, you're not being paid a pension for that day, you're not being paid national insurance for that day. um, so you're not accruing holiday for that day, but that's slightly different for schools. But yeah, I think again maybe this comes to culture too as well, and just appreciating and understanding, if Andy's not in school on that day, he's not in school on that day, so don't email him. Someone else will be able to deal with it. Yeah. So let's move on to thinking a bit about relationships with pupils and parents, because I know certainly in schools in England, pupil behavior is contributing to teacher workload. Um, and also parental complaints is something we're hearing about as being a real time sucker. you know things have changed, or life has changed, but so I think we can really save time and stress. Again, it's about workload and well-being by really thinking about those investing in those relationships with pupils and parents. And now, this is a huge issue. It's not an easy one to solve. At the end of the presentation, there are a couple of links to pieces on the website, with further, with ideas and linked signposts to further resources. But I do think that really thinking about how we can create positive relationships, putting the time into that communication, taking time to listen to people, trying to prevent problems turning into formal complaints, that is going to help with people's time and workload. I think clarity of communications is a really interesting one, because I think sometimes parents can feel like they're being bombarded with information from the school, and it all gets a bit confusing and things all get a bit stressed. But yeah, timely, clear communications, focusing on creating a sense of belonging. Again, I know there's been quite some research coming out here about the importance of a sense of belonging in terms of pupil engagement in school, and that also then feeds into staff engagement as well. And yeah, I think it's really important that staff feel supported when dealing with difficult, challenging conversations, or honest conversations when dealing with parent concerns. Okay, right. And yeah, lastly, number 5, wanted to talk about opportunities for professional growth. Now, it's a tricky one, and because I said we wanted to talk about things that won't bust the budget. And actually, in terms of the research, it does seem teachers seem to prefer funded CPD, and that is more popular. But that also maybe is connected into feelings about quality of CPD. Again, because some of the research that comes through suggests that teachers aren't always placing a high value on the CPD they experience. But there might be, sometimes it's because they feel it's not relevant, it's that whole school priority perhaps, but it doesn't feel like it's relevant to them, doesn't feel like it's relevant to where they are. And I just wanted to include that quote there from Carl Smith, who's principal of a school in Rutland. And he was talking about what had kept him in the job for many years. And he just talked about, look, sometimes if people feel like they're doing a decent job and able to get better at it, they will stick around. And then, then they want to stay, and then they're doing a bit better. They're growing, they're enjoying what they're doing. So in terms of professional development, I think, again, it's good if people do feel like it ties into what they want. I mean, yes, as a school, you might have your school development priorities, but can you marry those up? Can we find ways to marry those up with what teachers or as teams people want to do? For example, often I know secondary school teachers, often what they want is subject-based professional development. But I think, and as well, that it doesn't always have to be an external funded course. Things like, peer mentoring, in-house mentoring, peer observation projects, doing action research, a reading group, all of these things. People working in collaboration, I think, is quite powerful for effective CPD, because also what's really important with CPD for it to be effective is that there is time and space for implementation. And again, the Education and Endowment Foundation have got some guidance about effective CPD, what the research tells us. And one of the things, there's a link at the end of the slides, and again, what that really emphasizes is process. You really need to think about the process. How are people going to learn? How are they going to embed it? How are you going to see how it's doing? And it's probably better to focus on fewer things. Try and do things in more depth so that people can really, really see a difference. And as well, I think it's really important to make sure that it's for all staff, operational staff, support staff. There are professional development frameworks out there. For example, the Institute of School Business Leadership has got they've got their quality frameworks for different roles, say like in estates and in marketing. There's an estates competency framework for schools in England. There are things that people can use, teaching assistants too. There are frameworks that people can just use to have that conversation with their line manager about, where do I think I am? What do I want to do? What do I want to do to grow? Because I think, if people feel like they are growing, developing, they are more likely to want to stay. And I feel for those here in the international schools, I think this is really important too, isn't it? Because that is the kind of thing that people might then choose to stick with you for if they feel like they are getting that development and growth. But it is important, whatever you're doing in terms of professional development, it needs to be quality, evidence-based, research-backed. And I wanted to kind of finish the presentation element with a couple more quotes. These are both from podcasts. The links are there. I think being kind is something which is important. Being optimistic and hopeful and engendering positivity as leaders. In another recent podcast, we were talking about a CEO who has a counting the flowers approach. Every term, leaders gather together and they talk about the wins, what has worked. They count the flowers, even if things have been really tough and this hasn't gone well and that hasn't gone well. What are the things we can acknowledge that have worked? Okay, so there are some more links to explore, and also here on the slides, just some ways to stay in touch. But it'd be lovely to hear, Andy, if you've got some more questions or if you've had anything else coming through in the chat.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Liz. I know, obviously, that when I was looking at the screen, I was also looking at my notepad, and I'm just making some notes and just to summarize more or less what you've said all the way through. And I think all the things that you've said resonates, my role as a previous head teacher, but also as a governor, because the education world is changing, and certain things that, obviously this is my own point of view here that are coming, is the idea of stress, well-being. I think one time it was dismissed, just get on with it, that time. But now it is something that is very evident, and I think it does. My personal view is it starts with leadership. The idea of being willing to talk, willing to accept when things don't go according to plan. It's not a sign of weakness, and I think there's lots of leaders out there now that have coaches, and the staff know they have coaches just to talk through things. And just to discuss things, because I think talking is so important and discussing is so important. You talked about the line management meetings, and I think the line management meetings now with colleagues have moved away from the old traditional, like appraisal type approach for well-being check-ins. But again, for that to take place, you have to have a culture where people have been open and say if things are going well, maybe things that aren't going well, and that's not a sign of weakness. It's just a sign of helping people to develop. And I think also, and this is so hard about strategy, because everybody, whether it be leaders or HR that are attending this webinar, it's about having leadership that are able to create strategy rather than be operational, be sucked into things that are happening on a daily basis. It's about taking that time out to understand this is where we are now. What do we need to do? How do we plan forward? And deciding what's important at that time. Because as an education, I think people are very good at identifying what we need to do, because that can be the pressure maybe from education systems about, whether inspections about what we've got to do, but also we just need to just reflect of all the things that we've done on that journey. So you've said an awful lot of valuable things in there, and it gives, made me think about, because that's what we align with what I do with School IP. We create systems that actually build those in. So thank you very much, Liz. And obviously I'm going to be quiet now and let other people, if they've got anything in the chat to say.
Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you for jumping in there, Andy, with some questions of your own. Thank you for anyone that got involved in the chat at the start, letting us know where you're joining us from. See, we've got Del joining us from Bristol. We've got Nicola joining us from Spain, and we've got Penny joining us from the University of Kent Academies Trust. Not to name drop anyone, but I can also see we've got people joining us from the further education sector. We've got some independent school leaders joining us as well. And I can see we've got people joining us from Colombia, from Ghana, from a lot from the UK as well, but from some other places dotted around the world as well. So there's loads and loads of people joining us from various different sectors, geographical locations. So if anyone's got any questions related to their sort of setting, to their experiences, please do drop some questions in the chat now. We've got plenty of time before this webinar ends to go through any thoughts that you may have. So yeah, I'll leave it for a few minutes for some people to get involved. But if no one does get involved, then we can leave it there.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have people from so many different places joining us, and it would be interesting to hear, like, if some of the same issues that we're seeing in English schools, for example, the things like around behaviour and parents, I wonder if that's echoed in other places too. And I just wanted to go back to Andy's point as well about, particularly like senior leaders, head teachers. I think there can be such that pressure almost to be like the superhero. They're the ones that feel they have to put the armor on every day and be everything to everyone and support everyone, and don't always necessarily get the help they need themselves. But so yes, definitely important to take that time to talk or have supervision or coaching.
Brilliant. I can see a couple people typing in the chat, so
lovely.
we can give them a moment to type out their questions.
Yes.
For anyone that's watching this back, if you've got any questions once you've watched the recording, feel free to drop me an email. I'll be happy to connect you with Liz directly to go through any more points that you may have. The recording and the slides will be made available on our website for anyone that is joining us today. So you can rewatch this in the future, go through all of those links that Liz has shown you via the slideshow. And again, if anything pops up in the future, feel free to drop us an email as well.
While people are writing those questions, Lee, it might be a good idea to say what dementia education and school IP, college IP is about. So if I just share my screen with you. You can see here, we're a cloud-based platform, and we align with everything more or less that Liz has been talking about, because we're about creating solutions about staff development, personal development, and overall college and school improvement. And what we're aiming for is to tackle the admin heavy workloads and alignment of processes, so to free up time, because in some cases, people operate in silos with different activities. So that's what we aim to do. And as we go forward, you can see we also embrace each organisation's uniqueness, whether it be a college or a school, whether it be independent, whether it be state, whether it be in this country or another part of the country. And we offer online support. And if you want to know more about it, there's a QR code here, and there's a link where you can get in contact to find out more about what we do. So I thought I'd just share that while colleagues were just writing questions out there, Liam.
Yeah, thank you for that, Andy. Yeah, we'll just give it a couple more minutes. I can still see some people typing, so we'll just bear on for a couple more moments. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions about school IP or college IP more specifically, feel free to drop me an email about that as well. I will be reaching out following the end of this webinar with the recording link, which will be posted on the website, so you can reply to that with any further questions that you may have. We've got Dell there. Thank you for all the useful information. I'm interested in your thoughts on balancing supporting all our staff, but also managing expectations. For example, we support staff during a marriage breakdown, but the assumptions can often be that the school is the source of all the challenges.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, we often see, I guess things can change for members of staff, can't they? Like, when there are particularly stresses going on in their lives, it might be, new parents, or are very conscious that people perhaps they're, caring for people in their family, parents, or relationship changes, and all of those things, can't they, can create some additional stress. I think actually one of the points made in one of the case studies I had on the slides was, sometimes actually being able to offer flexible working temporarily can be a good solution for people. It doesn't always have to be something that's going on forever, but helping people manage a time. Yeah, but I guess there is all a sense then, if people are experiencing a difficult time, but they're seeing the challenges coming from the school, I that is tough. I think maybe some honest conversations need to come into play. Andy, how will you feel?
Yeah. I think sometimes, as you just pointed out, and hopefully these things do happen in school. And I think the pressures of working in education do put undue pressures on people's personal life. And I personally think, as you've said as you go along, I think it is going to be about the culture of the school and the openness that if people are struggling, they have someone to talk to, that in a trusted environment, because you don't want to get it to such a level that it breaks down the marriage, because that is the end point. And this, it's not going to happen overnight from something that happened on a Monday and then all of a sudden the marriage breaks down on a Wednesday. The point is it's going to be over a period of time. So I suppose it is, to me, in my personal view, it's the culture of the school. When someone is feeling a bit down, and there's no point going up to someone and say, how are you feeling? Because the automatic reaction is people turn around and say, I'm fine. Well, they're not fine because of the way they're acting and the behaviour. And when people aren't at their A game, but it is having a culture where they can talk through it. Because the smallest thing then doesn't then escalate and have the domino effect to getting bigger and bigger. So I do think it does start with the culture of the organisation, but I don't know what your views are on that, Liz.
Absolutely. I think that's right. And it's hard. How do you create a culture where actually yes, it's okay not to be okay. And it might be all right for me to say to you, yeah, I'm having a really tough week, without me feeling that's going to make you look on me negatively or think I'm not doing a great job. And that's where I think potentially going back to some of those frameworks, like the PERMA framework, resilience frameworks, might be useful too, because I suppose if you invest as something, this is something we regularly talk about, or we have a shared way of talking about how we're feeling, then it can become more part of regular, normal conversation. You're saying part of the culture, that we can share how we're feeling, and if things are tough, and we can find ways to support each other too.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. I hope that answers your question, Del. I can see you still typing, so we'll give you a couple more moments to get that one out. Again, if anyone else who's still with us wants to ask any questions, please do drop them in the chat now. We've still got about 10 minutes until the end of the webinar. So obviously, if there is no more, then we can call it early. But I would urge you to put those in now. Much better to talk about these while we're still here in the session rather than having to go back over email.
I think it would be really good if there's anybody who's been trying anything in their organisations, even if it's in the infancy, because obviously a lot of the things you've mentioned, Liz, they are over a period of time to get the results. But anybody that's started to put things in, because we've got an awful lot of colleagues here from all over the world, and if they're able to share, certainly say, yeah, we've done this type of thing. We did an open type questionnaire. We've changed our meetings where everyone's got to make contact every month or something along those lines. It would be great for people to share. Not saying anyone's turn, because people say, oh, as I said before, education profession, we're not very good at celebrating. People always start thinking, well, I've still got this to do, or I've still got that to do, but just a little bit, and say, well, actually, if people could try this, it'd be great if you had a collaborative forum of people just sharing what they've been doing as well. But obviously, it depends whether people want to contribute.
Yeah, that makes me think. I think for me as a teacher, one of the things that I found hard was that sense of often feeling like a failure because you can't do everything, because there's all these things that you feel you should be doing, but it's just not possible, or you'd end up hugely overworking, being up all night. So I think encouraging people to focus on what they have achieved, and just you really can't do everything. Sometimes good enough is good enough, can be quite a helpful thing, and trying to tackle some of the maybe those elements of perfectionism that because teachers generally are conscientious and we want to do a good job, but sometimes that can work against you.
Real. By the sounds of it, we answered Del's question, or you guys answered Del's question there. So yeah, he said he's going to follow up with some more via email. So I'll be happy to CC Liz into that conversation as well, to explore what you're currently doing at your school, Del. But by the looks of it, that will be the end of the webinar. I can't see anyone else typing, so we'll leave it there for today. I'll be in touch shortly with the watch back for the recording and the slides that Liz has prepared. So do keep an eye out on your emails for those coming through in the next few hours. Thank you, Liz, for presenting today. It was really, really great. Thank you for everyone joining, and thank you, Andy, for joining in there as well with some of your questions. I hope everyone's had a lovely session, and yeah, would look forward to seeing you at the next one.